What's up everybody, welcome to episode 8 of the KTM 250 rebuild. In the previous episode we started assembling the bike, and in this episode we will proceed with the suspension and the headset. Also we got quite some new subscribers, so I just want to say thanks and welcome to the channel. And now let's get started. So in this episode we're going to install the headset and the suspension. The maintenance of the suspension has been done by Shock Therapy, so that's a Dutch company that's specialized in suspension. They revalved the suspension and did all the maintenance, so replaced all the parts that had some wear, so everything is fresh again. So they also polished the tubes as well. The oil got replaced, so that's nice and fresh as well again. Before I started this build I wanted to change a performance part. I wanted to do something with the suspension, but complete new and factory suspension, that's just way too expensive for me. So I just wanted to try something new, and Shock Therapy came with a new kind of expansion vessel for the rear shock. So this is the original reservoir that is on the rear shock, and it has a piston that moves up and down in here. This goes quite tight in here, so you can imagine that it has quite some resistance while moving up and down. So when your suspension is working, this goes up and down in here. To minimize that resistance or get rid of the resistance, this one works exactly as an expansion vessel. So you can search on the internet expansion vessel, and then you see like a rubber diaphragm in here that is just going to expand as your rear shock compresses or decompresses. So it has no resistance at all. Also the reservoir is a little bit bigger, so it shouldn't heat up as fast. So I'm very curious to try this out and see if it has any effect on my riding, and I'm very excited to try this new valving and this new expansion vessel. So before we can mount the front suspension, we need to place the headset. We need to stuff the bearings with grease. We need to make sure that they're completely full of grease. So, and before we are mounting the rear shock, we just need to take a little bit of the powder coat off the frame at the point where this is mounting in. So we're first going to do the headset, and after that we're going to clean the powder coat of the frame to place the rear shock. So first we're going to try to put as much grease in the bearings as we can. I'm just going to push it from the top down. You have a little edge in there, so when you push it down you can put quite a lot of pressure in this corner, and that will force it in there, which makes it go down there as well. You see the grease coming out of the bearing. I'm also going to push it from the side. And then I'm going to put the last film of grease around the whole bearing. Okay, looks good. So for this one I'm going to put just some grease on my hand, and I will just push the bearing in here so the grease goes in all these recesses. So I'll do that from both sides. So you can see almost all the grease is already in the bearing, and then I'm going to push some in from the side. So So it's quite a lot heavier as well now, so you can feel all the greases in there. It's nice and packed. So I'm just going to, while I have my gloves on, I'm just going to put the upper bearing in the frame. So the frame is all clean and I cleaned the top. So we'll just drop this one in. And then I'm going to clean everything up and we're going to place the headset in the frame. So now that we have greased up the bearings, we're going to place the headset into the frame. We first need to place this rubber seal on the frame. Then we're going to place this cap over it. And on top of that goes this smaller O-ring. So first we're going to put some grease on these. So as you can see, this is how we put the bearing in. The seal has an edge at an angle, so that edge needs to point upward, so the cap can easily slide over there. So we're just going to place it around here. We'll grease up this one as well, just a little bit, see enough. So now we can place this cap over it. Then we will take all the stuff to the bike. So now we can put the bottom triple clamp through here. And then it should fit through the bearing. Push it up as far as you can and then place this O-ring. And then make sure that your top triple clamp is in easy reach, so you can grab it while you're placing the bottom one. There is an edge that has an angle in here, and that will fit the O-ring in there. So you can just push it on there. And then place the nut or place the bolt to secure it. So the triple clamps won't go anywhere now because we placed this bolt in here. So now to align everything, we're just going to place the front forks in there. So the air fork with the brake needs to go on the left side of the bike. You have these 3 rings in which you can adjust the height of the forks. So I'm just going to put them at the first one for now. We always can adjust it later on. And we're making sure that this is facing the front, so you can align this edge with the front of the triple clamp. So I tighten them just to make sure that the fork doesn't fall out. And later on we're going to put the torque on there. So with this one we're going to make sure that the screw to let the air out of the fork is facing the front of the bike. And also that we have the first line above the triple clamp. So for the bolts of the triple clamps it's quite important to put them on the right torque, because when you tighten them too much, the tubes will not go in and out smoothly. So there are several videos on YouTube that show if you tighten these too much, they will just have a lot of resistance at this point. So we're just going to tighten them on the torque that is on here. So 12 Nm for the bottom one and 17 Nm for the top one. So now first we're going to tighten the top ones. So we set those at the right height, and we want to keep this at the same level. So what we're going to do is loosen the bottom ones up, and then we're going to tighten the triple clamps together with the top bolt of the headset, and then we're going to tighten the whole thing up, so both of these and the bottom ones as well. Okay, so now I'm going to set it to 17. Then the last side. So just like that. So now the bottom ones are loose, so the bottom triple clamp can move up. So now that we have some weight of the forks in here, you can feel how easily it's steering. So what you don't want to have is that it's moving too easy from one side to the other. So we're just going to tighten it a little bit and feel how much force it takes to steer. So now it takes quite some force. And you don't want it too tight, but just make it tight enough so that you need to put a little force on there to make the steering happen. When you tighten it a bit and it takes some force to steer, it acts kind of like a steering damper. Because if it's too loose, your steer can easily go from one side to the other. I think this is okay. When the front wheel is in here, it will move a lot easier as well. So now I'm going to tighten this one. And this one you can tighten quite a lot. But still it's in aluminium, so watch out. So now that we tighten this bolt, the pen of the headset is connected to the top triple clamp, and then we can tighten this bolt a little bit extra. Just to make sure that stays in place. So now the headset is tightened. The last thing we need to do is set the bottom ones on torque. So there's 12 Newton meters. So that's one side. And that's the other side. So now the front end is nice and tightened. So now that the headset and the forks are in place, we're going to place the rear shock. So what we need to do is place this front side in between those two lips of the frame, but it is barely fitting. So I'm just going to take a little bit of powder coat off here to make this fit a little bit easier. So we're just going to use the Dremel again for that. So we're going to put some goggles on and then get the powder coating off there. And I'm just going to finish it off with some sandpaper. So now let's see if it fits in between there. Yes, fits very nice in between there. So the expansion vessel needs to sit on the right side of the bike. So this is the way you mount it. So we're just going to get the bolts and then put the rear shock in place. So for the bolts of the rear shock, I like to put a little bit of grease on the part that has no thread, and on the thread we're going to put some Loctite.
So just make sure that there is no grease on the thread. So we're going to take all these parts to the bike. So we're going to place the top one first, and then we're going to move the swing arm around to place the bottom one. So when you put the rear shock in, make sure that you put it in the hole of the swing arm, otherwise it won't fit through. And then we're first going to put the bottom one in and then tighten them both. We're going to put some Loctite on this one as well. Just move it in the right spot. And now we can tighten them both. These two can handle quite a lot of force. So just like that. It's looking good. So now that we have the headset and the suspension nice in place, we can move on with the next step. In the next episode I would like to place the carburetor, but before we're going to place it, we're going to take the carburetor apart and clean it from the inside so that we know there is no dirt that can screw things up. So that's for the next episode.
We made some nice progress, and in the next episode we will continue with cleaning and placing the carburetor. So make sure to subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss this episode. And as always, thanks for watching and see you next time.